The real reason behind most people being against reparation has nothing to do with it's too difficult to implement, we don't know who to pay, we don't know if we can afford it. That's not the real reason. The real reason most non-black and non-white people are against reparations for black people is because they don't want to participate in giving another group a competitive advantage over themselves. It's basic human nature. My name is Eric Shabazz, and you're listening to the Invisible Hand Podcast. The world's ran by human nature, self-interest, and power. Let's get into it. My name is Eric Shabazz, and you're watching the Invisible Hand Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why reparations for blacks in America violates the laws of power. So in this video, what I'm going to be breaking down is why reparations fundamentally, most likely, in my personal opinion, will never happen at any significant level in America. And it won't be for any of the common objections you hear about why reparations won't work. So real quickly, just to save you a little time, I'm going to tell you what the arguments are for reparations and against reparations. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this part because a lot of you guys probably already heard these arguments, but I'm going to get to my last argument of the real reason why reparations at any significant level will never happen in America, in my personal opinion. So let's get into it. First of all, what is the current arguments for reparations? Well, the number one argument is slavery contributed to a systematic disparity in opportunity. Also, slavery led to a giant disparity in wealth that should be addressed. Another argument is the government has paid reparations before, so why not us? They paid reparations to the Japanese, and they also even created reparations for Indians. So they figure, you've done this before, why won't you do it for us? And we're gonna get into why they won't do it for African Americans, in my personal opinion, toward the end of the video. It's not going to be the common reason you're used to hearing. And lastly, we're no longer agreeing to a race that's rigged. Essentially what that means is African Americans are so behind whites in wealth, power, and control that even if we played the game fair, that means that we were good citizens, we educated ourselves, we didn't commit crime, we went to work, we worked hard. Based on the competitive advantage that America has, the dominant society, we would still never catch up. It's almost like a rigged game. So that is the central reason why in the argument that reparations is needed, because the game is so lopsided that we would never catch up even if we did everything right. Just to illustrate that, let's give you a couple stats. The median income of whites is more than double that of black Americans, most of modern history. Unemployment rates for black Americans is more than double that of white Americans. The poverty rate for black Americans is more than double of white Americans. Out of 1,994 U.S. senators, only 11 in the history of the country have been black. Black businesses comprise only 2.2% of the nation's 5.7 million employers and businesses. Black people own less than 1% of the rural land in the U.S., when whites own more than 90%. So when you really get down to it, all the metrics that matter in a society, in an economy, in capitalism that allow you to ascend, they dominate so much. And most of that competitive advantage they have was basically created from slavery. They basically lived off the work and the labor of Africans. They put them through Jim Crow, and that wealth that they built, they just continued to basically pull away, and we'll never catch up. So that's what I mean by no longer agreeing to a race that rigged. Now, what are the common arguments against reparations? And then toward the end, I'm going to get into the real reason why reparations will never happen in America. And it won't be, in my personal opinion, the majority of the common arguments you hear against reparations. So one of the first arguments you hear is no one's currently living that's responsible for slavery. So basically, hey, I didn't do it. I have nothing to do with it, so why should I pay for it? Which is a logical, legitimate argument. Reparations would further divide the country along race lines. Essentially what that means is human nature. If you give one group a significant amount of money or entitlements that creates a basically vacuum between one class and the other, they're not going to actively participate in that. So let's be honest, in order for reparations to happen, basically the government is going to use taxpayers' money. That means they're going to use white people's money, black people's money, Hispanic people's money, Indian people's money, Arab people's money. And so to build up one specific group, Keep in mind, in America, we're all competing against each other. Even though we're all American, we're all competing within groups. And a group is not going to actively participate in elevating another group over themselves. So right there, they believe that by implementing reparations, specifically giving cash, will create basically social unrest. I personally believe it would too. If you think about human nature, people normally act in their own self-interest, and allowing another group to ascend to a competitive position over you and willingly participating, most human beings are not going to do that. They may not tell you that publicly, but when it comes down to their actions, they're not going to want to participate. So I think that's a legitimate argument against it. Also, reparations would be too expensive and too difficult to implement. Essentially, this argument is, hey, how much money do you pay them? Who should get it? We don't know who's truly black. Do mixed race people get it? Do people who came from another country who are black get it? Can we even get all the documents to prove who's black and who was here at the time? So they're basically saying it's impractical, right? That's another major argument against reparation. In my personal opinion, the person who's going to push back the most on the argument for reparations will be all the others who are non-black and non-white in America. Let me explain. Over 25% of the population in America is non-white and non-black. That's Asian, that's Indian, that's Arab, that's Hispanic, etc. And this group of people usually came from another country or were born here that don't have a direct connection to the legacy of slavery. They feel neutral in this situation. And furthermore, they feel like they had nothing to do with it. So when America comes as the U.S. government and say we need to allocate 10, 20, 30, $50 billion for reparations, whether it's in cash or entitlements or a mix of both, to African Americans, most of that 25% of others in the United States will have a serious problem with it. In my personal opinion, that other group will be more vocal than even the white people who are against reparations for African Americans. And here's why. They're going to be against it because of social dynamics and human nature. Even though we are all American, we all live under the same flag, we all are allegiance to the same economy. However, according to social dynamics and human nature and self-interest, we also compete inside of this country as groups. Asians have a group, blacks have a group, Hispanics got a group, right? And et cetera, et cetera. And so even though we work together and we go to the same jobs, we're also competing for social hierarchy and resources. So what you're not going to have is a large group of the 25% of this population, actively participating in elevating a group like blacks to a higher position in society. Keep in mind, they're aware that we're competing with each other. It's self-interest. It's not in other groups' self-interest to push through reparations on behalf of black people. Why would they? The first thing they're going to be thinking is, what do I get out the deal? Why would I allow a significant amount of American blacks to go to the middle class or the upper middle class on my tax dollar for a crime that this country did that I had nothing to do with? So in my opinion, the other groups in America will be the biggest group against blacks receiving reparations. Now, here's the thing. Human beings don't like to let people know what their true intentions are. Now, according to the 48 laws of power, mask your intentions. What does he say? In the 48 laws of power, Robert Greene talks about throw people off the scent by pretending to support an ideal or pretending to reject an ideal without revealing your true motives. Now think about this. All the people who are truly against reparations, let's say the other 25% of America who's non-black and non-white, they're not going to tell you that they're against reparations because they don't want one group to be elevated over them. They're never going to vocalize their true reason why they're against reparations, which they shouldn't. Neither would I. But I just want you to understand what the true motives and why it's going to be so difficult to get a bill like reparations passed in any significant cash amount or even any significant entitlement amount. Reparations was supposed to be about righting a wrong, right? That's the reason why Americans supposed to support it, right? America did some wrongs. We want to make it right, and we want the racial battling to ease, and we want this country to heal. That's why everybody's supposed to be on board. But that's how human nature works. People are not about to act against their own self-interest. So all the non-black people in America who will not get payments for reparations are going to have a serious problem using their tax dollar to give to African Americans and elevating an entire group socially, right? We're innocent of the crime, they believe. Why should we pay? And also, they refuse to participate, like I said, in giving another group a leg up. It's basic human nature. We're competing as groups amongst ourselves. We're not going to actively give each other a leg up. The real reason behind most people being against reparation has nothing to do with it's too difficult to implement. We don't know who to pay. We don't know if we can afford it. That's not the real reason. The real reason most non-black and non-white people are against reparations for black people is because they don't want to participate in giving another group a competitive advantage over themselves. It's basic human nature. Hey guys, here's a few words from our sponsors. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll be right back. The future of legal betting is finally here. Place a bet using Bitcoin right over the phone. Unlike traditional gambling sites, every bet you make with us is guaranteed a 50% probability of winning. All of our bets are one-on-one against a real person and never the house. We offer some of the most unique bets in the industry. Bets like, will LeBron James win his 5th NBA title? Will Joe Biden be elected for a second term? Will Tesla be worth $1 trillion by the end of 2022? You can bet on if it'll rain tomorrow. You can literally bet on any future event. Text the phrase "I bet" to the number on the screen, and I'll reply back with a list of all of our available bets. Again, text 323-536-2313. Again, text 323-536-2313 today. Now, here's the thing. What is the number one reason reparations will never happen in America, in my personal opinion? Okay, let's look at this. 1% of America controls the majority of wealth. 1% of America has more wealth than 80% of the population of the United States. Okay? And the majority of the wealth trickles down to the dominant group, who happen to be white. Now, what is our argument for reparations? Right or wrong? Do the right thing? Send a signal that America's changing? That type of reasoning is not strong enough for people to willingly hand over power. Handing over significant cash payments, 10, 20, 30, 50 trillion dollars for reparations, which is what's probably truly owed, right, would shift the balance of power. But here's the problem. Power is the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. So the question becomes, what capacity or leverage do African Americans have to make America pay significant reparations? What can we do to impose our will and force America to pay reparations? Well, the current argument is you should just do the right thing. You should send a message that America is changing. Power, the nature of power, is expansive in nature. That means power is only to expand and get more power. That's the nature of power. The nature of power is not to be given away. Power is either taken or lost. Power is combated by force. So if you look at African Americans' arguments for reparations, it has no teeth. We're basically appealing to people's virtue and hearts. And appealing to people's virtues and hearts do not work better than appealing to people's self-interest. Now, I want you to really understand how America's structured. The wealthiest 1% of America controls about $41 trillion. That's about 16 times more wealth than the bottom 50%. If just 25% of the $41 trillion was reallocated to paying debt of reparations, Black Americans would receive roughly $10 trillion of cash payments and or entitlements. That's roughly $200-some thousand per person. That's 44 million people receiving $200,000 each. If that were to happen, that would make African Americans probably the wealthiest group in America, if from a statistical proportional perspective, because you will have 44 million people with at least $200,000. That means you'll be the wealthiest group. You'll be more wealthier than individual whites by numbers. You'll be more wealthier than every other group. Then you'll have the 1% with a significant amount of wealth. And so if those payments are made, that means what will be happening is every group in America would be participating in elevating one group, African Americans, to one of the highest, wealthiest groups in America just by agreeing to do reparations. That is, by its nature, the real reason why reparations will never happen, because it's not in the people we need to participate self-interest to do it. We would need taxpayers, that's every race in America, to agree to give us reparations. So if you think about it from a self-interest perspective, why would they actively agree to elevate one group over other when they're actively competing against us? So these are some of the things you need to think about when you're thinking about the reparation argument. The nature of power is to get more power. Power is never handed over. Go look back in history and tell me when somebody handed over a significant power. Go look back in history when Rome fell. Did they hand over Rome to another group? No, they fought to the very end. So asking for significant reparations and giving them to us would be white people in the dominant society literally handing over power. Power is never handed over. So in order for reparations to happen, you would either need to appeal to self-interest, you would need revolution, or you would need to forcefully demand through significant threats to make this happen. But I think it would never happen because power is never handed over. You would literally need to fight for it. I'll give you an example. Let's just say hypothetically, we give you $10 trillion of reparations to 44 million blacks. That's $200,000 for every black in America. You'll be the wealthiest group proportionally in America, right? What would that do? Well, from a government perspective, if everybody got $200,000, you can vote differently. You can have lobbyists lobbying the government, eroding the power that the current dominant society has. You can affect politics more effectively. You can support your own politicians and you'll be able to financially support them and competitively compete in the political arena. So they'll be basically eroding the dominant society's power over politics if more wealth is in the hands of African American. Business. You can start your own businesses, right? You'll be able to create your own capital, control your own industries, because you'll have a significant amount of capital to start a significant amount of businesses. Now the power of businesses dominated by the dominant society can be eroded. See all these things that can be eroded by giving a significant amount of reparations to blacks? Jobs, right? The majority of corporate jobs in America, Amazon, you have Walmart workers, are African American low-wage workers. If every black or African American was given $200,000 of reparations in America, they no longer have their low-wage workforce. Because if you have $200,000 in the bank, you're able to think about what you want to do next. You're able to go educate yourself. You're able to go start businesses and work with your own people. Why would you go work for Walmart for $10, $15 an hour? So by giving a significant amount of reparations, they would erode their low-wage workforce, which is the majority of blacks and Mexicans. So now you start to see that giving out reparations would shift the balance of power in America. And so when you really start thinking about how much it would impact America and how much power they would be handing over by giving you significant reparations, you'll start to understand why it's so unlikely they will never agree to give any significant amount of reparations. Let's look at this, Wall Street. If every black American, this is only 10 trillion. Personally, I think 50 to 100 trillion is what actually is owed. I think personally, every African American in the country should get $1 million, which would equal to $44 trillion, right? But let's just keep it at 10 trillion to be realistic. If every American, every black African American was given $200,000, which is $10 trillion of reparations, which is the low end of what's owed, Wall Street would be affected. Every black American can buy into corporate companies and own a significant stake of these companies. And now they can erode the power of the dominant society's stranglehold over wealth, right? If every African American is given $200,000, we can actively affect the legal system. We can have more educated people go into law, become judges. We can have lobbying money to combat and reform the legal system just by getting reparations. So when you understand the wide-reaching power of having wealth at that level and giving a group significant wealth all at once, $10 trillion, $200,000 per African American, you'll start to understand that they would literally be handing over significant power to African Americans. And for that reason, that power doesn't hand over anything, you have to take it. I don't believe that reparations will ever be willingly done. Now, when I say reparations, I'm talking about them agreeing to give significant cash payments, lump sum to African Americans for reparations. They're going to always, I think they're only going to give the very minimum they can get away with to move the conversation away from reparations. Because if they were to give any significant reparations to African Americans, they won't just be handing over reparations. They'll be handing over a significant amount of power, which power simply does not do. I'm going to read a quote to you by Frederick Douglass. Power and those in control concede nothing without a demand. Hate never have and never will. Each and every one of us must keep demanding, must keep fighting, must keep thundering, must keep plowing, must keep on keeping things struggling, must speak out and speak up until justice is served, because where there's no justice, there is no peace. What he's essentially saying is power does not willingly hand over power. And for that reason, what we're actually asking for when it comes to reparations is for America to hand over significant power to us without a fight, without any leverage forcing their hand, but simply because it's the right thing to do. Not only are we asking America to do that, and the 1% and the majority of middle-class whites, we're asking 25% of America who are non-white and non-black, who had nothing to do with slavery, to actively participate in elevating a group over them who they're competing with. We're asking Asians and Mexicans and anybody else who immigrated to this country to take money out of their pocket and give it to African Americans, while still competing for social status against African Americans. So when you think about human nature and self-interest, what you're asking is something that's going to be rejected on multiple levels. White people are going to reject it. Middle-class white people are going to reject it. People who immigrated from another country are going to reject it, because we're all competing, and nobody's going to willingly allocate significant fund and advantage to their competition. And that's the thing we have to think about. So let's say everything is not lost and we still want reparations to happen. What type of strategies should we employ to actually convince people that maybe we should do this? Well, let's look at some of Robert Greene's laws of power and laws of human nature. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest and never to their mercy or gratitude. That's the 48 laws of power, law number 13. So don't appeal to their heart or to gratitude. Appeal to their self-interest. How should we approach this from a strategic perspective? Well, according to the 48 laws of power, if you need to turn to an ally for help, do not bother to remind him of your past assistance or good deeds. He will find a way to ignore you. Instead, uncover something in your request or in your alliance with him that will benefit him and emphasize it out of all proportion. He will respond enthusiastically when he sees something is to be gained for himself. So the question is, why should people care that African Americans think the government should give us reparations? Don't confuse your needs with others, right? So we should be appealing to their self-interest. So if we're going to get reparations in America, first of all, we're going to have to work with the other 25% of the population who are non-black and non-white, who had nothing to do with slavery. And we're going to have to put something in our request for reparation that includes them. So they're not going to agree to give you any significant cash payments or entitlements in the form of reparations while it elevates you above them and they get nothing. That goes against their own self-interest. Now, they may not publicly say that because it'll make them look bad that they don't want African Americans to get reparations. So they're never going to say that they have a problem with it. They're going to simply say it's not fair. We don't know who to pay it from, how we're going to afford it. But the real reason they don't want to do it is because it's going to elevate you above them. It's just human nature, and it's not in their best interest to do it, which I agree. So we're going to have to request reparations from America, from the 1%, and also get something for the rest of America. That means the lower class, people in poverty, the other 25% that are non-black and non-white. We also have to get something from them where it benefits them as well, for they can get on board for reparations. Alfred Shabazz, the Invisible Hand Podcast. I'm out.